Imagine an idyllic tropical paradise, sandy beaches, warm weather, surf, sun, and exotic plants. Now, imagine in contrast a dilapidated building, guard towers, razor wire, iron bars, and overcrowded cells. Kerobokan Prison, located on the Indonesian island of Bali, has a reputation for being one of the most overcrowded and underfunded prisons in the world. A prison built to house only 300 inmates now holds over 1,400. Children as young as 14 have been incarcerated in overcrowded cells alongside murderers and sex offenders, rats, disease, corrupt prison guards, and firing squads. It's easy to see why Kerobokan Prison is ironically named Hotel K. Welcome back to Shadow Matter. If you're new here, g'day, hello, kia ora. Join me in the shadows here every second Sunday for a look into the darker side of our world with a focus on stories and cases from Australia and New Zealand. If you think my voice is boring and you'd rather fall asleep to it, then why not do it by listening to my podcast? Search Shadow Matter on Spotify to listen to older episodes and Spotify Shadow Matter exclusives. If you're afraid of the dark and don't feel like being alone, then consider joining the other members of this channel for members-only videos that feature behind-the-scenes and exclusive updates to popular videos. In today's episode, we are taking a look behind the bars of Bali's most notorious prison, Kerobokan. Colloquially referred to as Hotel K by locals and ex-inmates, its grey concrete and graffitied exterior, crowned with razor wire, have strangely become somewhat of an icon. Tourists will even happily get their selfies snapped in front of the prison exterior to brag to their mates on Instagram? Look, been there, done that. I've been to Bali too. If you know, you know.
Been there, done that. I've been to Bali too.
The Indonesian island of Bali is one of the most visited tourist destinations in the world. Growing in popularity every year, as of 2024, Bali has seen over 45 million tourists visit in the past 10 years. 70% of those tourists came from Australia. An island paradise, a home away from home, Bali, by extension, is Australia's playground. Australians have been flocking to the tropical paradise since the 70s when it became a popular destination among surfers. Since then, it has become a popular destination globally for overseas travellers. The darker side of this is the amount of Australian nationals who have been locked up behind Bali's most notorious prison, more often than not due to Indonesia's strict drug laws. In the past 20 years, Kerobokan Prison has been featured quite extensively in the media, especially in Australia and New Zealand. Headlines often spell out details of some poor Aussie who got locked up for breaking the strict drug laws of Indonesia and ended up getting a harsh sentence or getting executed. Tales of what's behind the bars would leave some shocked to the core, the stuff that nightmares are made of. Disease rife from overcrowded cells, a putrid overflowing squatty potty that you have to share with all the other inmates. Oh yeah, there's only one. Corrupt guards on the take, wild sex parties, rats, disease, and sometimes your cellmate just dies in the middle of the night, right next to you. Because in these cells, you could be sleeping huddled up next to 20 to 30 other people. Some could argue, well, you break the law, you get what you deserve. Absolutely. But do you really deserve to be placed in the same cell as murderers and pedophiles? And what if you're a 14-year-old boy who broke the laws of a foreign authority? Can you really argue that your moral compass is pointing north at that age? Does he deserve to be locked up with adults who have committed way worse atrocities? Kerobokan Prison is located in North Kuta, Bali. Kuta is renowned for being a tourist hotspot, especially among Australian travellers. It's in the heart of this tourist mecca that one can spot the outer paint-chipped walls and buildings of Hotel K. Donned with guard towers and razor wire, the compound inside was built in 1979 and designed to hold only 320 male prisoners. However, at any time, the number of inmates is almost 4 times the capacity. In 2017, the prison housed a record number of 1,400 inmates, both male and female. The males, as far as I'm aware, are separated from the female inmates, and according to sources in 2018, a new women's prison in Denpasar was built to further this separation. As described before, inmates are squeezed into small cells with dozens of others. The lack of bedding or even a mattress means they have to sleep on the floor among other bodies. It's not uncommon to be woken up by a rat chewing on your dead cellmate, or a cockroach crawling nearby looking for scraps. Disease is common, and at certain times it may come hard to tell whether someone perished because of the inhumane conditions or perhaps they were murdered over a drug debt. The prison receives 15,000 rupiah or $1.08 Australian per day for each prisoner. If you have some more capital behind you, you could bribe your way into a more comfortable, isolated cell. And speaking of bribes, guards have been known to lure sex workers into the prison to be used by the inmates. Yeah, wild times. Offenders who were convicted on drug charges make up the lion's share of inmates, with a whopping 78% of the prison population. The others are made up of killers, sex offenders, and low-life general scumbags. Inmates come from all nationalities, although mostly Indonesian. It's the foreign population that dominate the headlines overseas. In 2007, the brother of celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay, Ronnie Ramsay, was convicted of possessing 100 milligrams of heroin in Bali when entering a supermarket in Bali's tourist strip of Kuta. In 2004, the name Schapelle Corby dominated the news in Australia and New Zealand when the beauty school student from Queensland was arrested in Bali after customs found her boogie board stuffed with 4.1 kilos of cannabis. Although she claims she was a drug mule and pled her innocence, Schapelle was detained and the following year was sentenced to 20 years in Kerobokan. Her sentence was cut short when she was released on parole in 2014 after serving 9 years. Corby's defense during the trial was that she had become unwittingly a drug mule and that deceitful airport baggage handlers had planted the drugs into her unlocked bag.
My brother, is that your bag? Is that your boogie board? I'm going, ah, yay, I'm so happy. Oh, it's mine. Hey, here you go. Whee. Yep, that's mine.
He felt that you were acting almost suspiciously.
No. And then they did a little test and it came in purple, and then they came to me and it said it's marijuana. And I'm like, well, yeah, I can smell it's marijuana, but it's not mine. This is my bag and this is not mine. But they were getting my brother to touch it and do all things, and I'm like, it didn't hit me. What's happening?
The premise was made by her lawyer that the drugs were intended to land in Sydney and that the Australian Federal Police knew of Australians who had their luggage being tampered with in events like these. The whole Schapelle Corby saga was definitely a legal mess. Her defence lawyer later claimed that he lied about baggage handlers implanting drugs into unaware Australian citizens' bags at domestic airports. Now, remember, this was just a couple of years after the Bali bombings, so not only could you be sharing a cell with murderers and drug offenders, but you could also be in close quarters with terrorists. And we'll be taking a little bit more of a look at that later in the video, so stick around. Other well-known drug offenders that have called Kerobokan home are the infamous media-dubbed Bali Nine. In 2005, 9 Australian nationals were caught attempting to smuggle 8.3 kilos of heroin out of Bali and back into Australia. The drugs were valued at around $4 million, and Indonesian authorities were tipped off by the Australian Federal Police, who had been keeping an eye on the group. The group consisted of 2 ringleaders, Muran or Mark Sukumaran and Andrew Chan, and 7 other accomplices, Si Yi Chen, Michael Sugaj, Tan Duk Tan Nguyen, Matthew Norman, Scott Rush, Martin Stevens, and Renee Lawrence. Sukumaran and Chan were sentenced to death and eventually executed in 2015, while the others were given life imprisonment, save for Renee Lawrence, who was given 20 years. Her sentence was later commuted and she was released in 2018. Tan Duk Tan Nguyen also later died from stomach cancer. The group's confinement in Bali's most notorious prison and their sentences were heavily criticised by Amnesty International and the Australian government, as well as members of the public, especially following the executions of Sukumaran and Chan. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was successful in lobbying with the Indonesian president, and in December 2024, the remaining 5 members were repatriated to Australia and were no longer required to serve any more time. 2011 saw the youngest Australian ever to be arrested in Indonesia. This happened after a 14-year-old boy was caught with 6.9 grams of marijuana. Under strict Indonesian narcotics laws, the teenager from New South Wales Central Coast could be held without charge for 30 days and tried as an adult, for which the maximum jail sentence for possession is 12 years. Although the boy was shortly returned to Australia after 2 months, he did spend a little time in Hotel K. After it was deemed unsuitable for his incarceration, most likely the Indonesian government trying to avoid an international mess. The boy was detained at an immigration facility for the remainder of his stay. In Indonesia, many juvenile criminals are tried as adults, meaning they face the same harsh penalties and judicial system. At the time of his arrest, Kerobokan incarcerated 11 children, 10 boys and 1 girl, and they weren't separated from the general population. And it's not just Aussies who get locked up either. Many foreign nationals have been unlucky enough to call this hellhole home. British woman Lindsay Sandiford got done in 2012, and she was sentenced to death in January 2013 by a court in Indonesia after being found guilty of smuggling cocaine into Bali. The sentencing was condemned by the British public, and although the UK government did try to intervene in her appeals, they were ultimately rejected by Indonesian courts. Mikhail Blanc, a French national who was convicted of drug trafficking in Indonesia after 3.8 kilograms of hashish were found in his diving gear when he attempted to re-enter Bali in December 1999. He was sentenced to life in prison, but was released in 2014 under strict bail conditions. He eventually returned to France in 2018. A New Zealand man by the name of Anthony de Melmonte was arrested for allegedly smuggling 1.7 kilos of methamphetamine in his backpack at the international airport in Denpasar in December 2014. The Wanganui local has currently been serving time since and is now in old age, has numerous ailments such as COPD, a serious lung disease, and claims he was the victim of an online romance scam. According to de Melmonte, he started talking to a woman online named Jessie Smith, who claimed to be a wealthy South African businesswoman and cocoa company owner. She offered de Melmonte money for flights, clothes, and a passport in return for meeting her in Hong Kong. Jessie's associates told de Melmonte that his online girlfriend was not in Hong Kong and that he had to fly to Bali to meet her. They bought him a new suitcase for his flight to Bali, and after de Melmonte had a quick look for anything suspicious, he proceeded with his trip. When de Melmonte arrived in Bali, customs officers found almost 2 kilos worth of methamphetamine in his bag. Recently, pressure has been put to New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Luxon to follow in the footsteps of his Australian counterpart and make deals to get men like Anthony de Melmonte released. Aside from drug offenders, Kerobokan was also home to terrorists. In 2002, a series of bombings targeted nightclubs that were frequented by foreign tourists in Kuta, and one in front of the American consulate in nearby Denpasar. The attack was carried out by the Indonesian terrorist group Jemaah Islamiyah, a Southeast Asian jihadist organization with links to Al-Qaeda. The attack took the lives of 202 innocent people, including 88 Australian citizens. It was the single largest loss of life to Australians due to an act of terror. The investigations that followed the terrorist attack, undertaken not only by Indonesian authorities but also by Australian and British task forces, more than 30 people suspected of being involved with the bombings were arrested. A week after the attack, Indonesian police arrested the spiritual leader of Jemaah Islamiyah under suspicion of involvement in the attack. It wasn't until a month later that authorities arrested those directly responsible: Imam Samudra Ali Gufron, his 2 brothers, Ali Umron and Amrozi bin Nurhasim, who was known in the media as the Smiling Assassin. I do apologize if I've mispronounced any of those names, but, These groups of cowards spent their time in Hotel K among the general population, as far as sources indicate, but eventually moved to another location and were executed by firing squad in 2008. Well, so far, Hotel Kerobokan sounds like a lovely place. Where's the brochure? Sign me up. But if you're still not convinced that spending your time with murderers, terrorists, and rock spiders doesn't sound like an awesome lifelong holiday, then how about the spacious rooms and natural wildlife? Did I mention the awesome raves? Wait, did I say raves? I meant riots and sex parties. Oh yeah, this video's gonna get demonetized. According to best-selling author Catherine Bonella, who spent time in Kerobokan for her book Hotel K, she describes how Schapelle Corby became so desensitized to the environment that she was unfazed when she saw another inmate dead in their cell, or how prisoners would share a blocked-up squat toilet covered in, well, you get the picture. Bonella also described the wild sex nights where men paid for sex workers to enter Kerobokan, and the prisoners would take turns, cheered on by guards pocketing a cut of the money. Australian man Paul Conabere has written about his own experience inside Kerobokan in a book titled I Survived Kerobokan. Conabere says his wallet and phone was stolen while in Bali, and a dispute over an unpaid bill led to his arrest. He was charged and imprisoned for almost 12 months, alongside serial killers and pedophiles. While inside Kerobokan, he witnessed murders and saw prisoners die of drug overdoses. Quote, "The water is infected and you get rashes, so you get sick every second week." End quote. He slept on the floor among rats, cockroaches, and ants, with no money to barter for food or water. Riots are common, and in 2012, Indonesian police had to move about 60 foreign prisoners from Kerobokan after a riot broke out, and authorities feared they would be taken as hostages. In 2015, another riot broke out between rival gangs, and again, the police had to move about 100 foreign inmates to different prisons. With all this horror going on, you'd wonder if people ever planned a prison break. Well, Kerobokan has its fair share of escapes as well. On the 19th of June 2017, 4 prisoners escaped Kerobokan via a hole dug under a wall. The tunnel was 50 centimetres by 70 centimetres wide and 15 metres long. One of those prisoners was Australian drug trafficker Shaun Davidson, who managed to evade recapture for over 7 years and counting now. He regularly taunts the police with Facebook messages and occasionally cheekily checks in online to various spots around the world. One time at a McDonald's in Changi Airport in Singapore. Several months later, another escape was attempted when 2 prisoners, Shaun Beasley and Paul Anthony Hoffman from the United States, escaped, allegedly using a ladder to climb the prison wall. Hoffman was caught immediately, according to authorities, while Beasley was able to get away. A manhunt was started following his escape. Beasley was recaptured a week later, hiding out on the neighbouring island of Lombok. And that is today's episode. Hope you're not eating during this video. I was thinking of doing a few more videos around Bali, so let me know if you'd like to see those in the comments below. With Anzac Day coming around the corner, I do have a video on the Anzacs in the Vietnam War coming out in 2 weeks, so keep an eye out for that. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell, and I'll see you next time in the shadows.